Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
We are recording. We're going to take just a few minutes to wait for folks to join and get started, but welcome to the webinar. We'll officially get started in just a few minutes. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Like we have a few participants so far. We're going to get started in a few minutes, probably just a couple of minutes after the hour. And live on Facebook. Manage, SustainUS.
Which is amazing.
It is. What should the title be? Ready?
Mm-hmm.
How's that? I mean, it's kind of cool. Ooh. Alive. That's great. I'll shut all this down. And shall we?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Aneesa.
And I'm Daniel.
And welcome to our first webinar, an introduction to the SustainUS Climate Justice Challenge and our COP24 delegation. We're really excited to have all of you on this call, and thanks for taking the time to talk to us. We're really excited to introduce ourselves, to introduce our vision for the delegation, talk about the application process, and to get to know all of you and get to answer some of your questions that you might have right now.
Absolutely, yeah. Today you're going to get to hear about who we are, who Aneesa and I are, the overview of the delegation, why we're going to this International Climate Summit, what our key goals are, sort of what our approach is, and then we're going to go through the application process and answer all of your questions. And you're also going to get to have a chance to hear from 3 amazing panelists who completed the SustainUS Challenge in previous years and are going to tell you a little bit about their experience. So just before we get started, I want to introduce folks to the webinar technology. In the bottom right corner, you have a chat window where you can chat to, I believe you're able to chat to everyone. And that's a place where you can just chat as much as you like, and we'll be, answering your questions. Yeah, you all are muted right now, so chatting is the best way. Kendrick says, hey, it's Kendrick Eagle. Hey, Kendrick.
Hi.
There's also the Q&A, which is a different little box. And if you ask us a question during the Q&A, we'll get to all of those questions. And we'll have a chance to, unmute you all and let you all say hi as well.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep.
Awesome.
And, using the webinar software is, don't stress about it if it doesn't make sense. But I think because there's 9 of you, we wanted to give everyone a brief chance to say hi.
Yeah.
So, if you could share in the chat your name, where you're calling in from, and someone or something that has inspired you. Given the number of folks, I'm thinking, what if we unmute each one of them and give them a chance to just share that?
Yeah, until more people join, that'll be nice.
Verbally. Great. So I'm going to just unmute everyone here. Good morning.
Good morning.
And just.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Oh, I don't see you guys no more. Is that the thing?
Let's have folks share one at a time your name, where you're calling in from, and someone or something that has inspired you in your life as a change maker, organizer, activist. Maybe we'll start. I'm Daniel. I'm calling in from Oakland. And something that's inspired me is actually my dad, who's been involved in different kinds of environment before I was born, and these things.
Oh.
Sorry, Kendrick.
You're fine.
I'm Aneesa.
I keep cutting out. I don't know.
Sorry. And yeah, someone who has inspired me is my mentor. I think of my mentor. His name is Asad Rahman, and he's amazing social justice activist in the UK.
So, so let's start from the top. Amber, will you?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, my name I'm calling in. That's inspired me is seeing the number of that, like one the number of people have really gotten making changes. Got elected. I feel and oh, I will see if I can plug. I'm hearing that people are getting feedback. I'll see if I can plug in headphones, but I'll need to move to do that. But yeah. Oh, sorry, Ella.
We fixed the issue.
You fixed it?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Can people hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ella. Yeah. Yeah, just seeing like the number of people who have been involved in the past year, and the explosion of organizations and young people that are trying to make a difference has been super inspiring to me. And it makes me feel like a lot more is possible. And yeah, I guess also reading This Is an Uprising has been really incredible, because now I feel like I know how. Yeah, does that?
Yep.
Awesome.
Just a heads up, I'm seeing now, because of time and all the other folks joining, we probably won't have time for every single person to introduce themselves. So what we'd love to do is have everyone in the chat your name, where you're calling from, and someone or something that inspires you, and maybe like there's 3 or 4 of you just to pop in and share it verbally just for a couple of minutes so we have time to get to everything today. So is there anyone else who wants to share over the audio while everyone's sharing on the video? Yeah. Go for it.
Hi,
All right, can you hear? Can you hear? Oh, no, I'm cutting out. Can you guys hear me? Or did?
Loud and clear.
Oh, perfect. Oh, you can go first. Whoever was not talking. Shayna.
Hi everyone. I'm calling in from Reading, Pennsylvania, and kind of like Amber, I was feeling the same as far as like inspiration. Last year, I was lucky enough to go to COP23, and it was really amazing and inspiring to see all these different young people from all around the world, and kind of what led me to really want to possibly go to COP again this year through SustainUS is seeing the inspirational demonstration that occurred the second week of COP when SustainUS protested at a panel discussion that was sponsored by the Trump administration. And it was really moving because I feel like where I'm from, there's not a lot of young people that I can connect with easily that care about this issue.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Is that me? Oh. You want me to go, Daniel? Hello? Oh. Okay, I'm gonna go.
Go for it.
Perfect. Okay, great. Sorry. I didn't hear anything back. My name is Kendrick Eagle. I'm calling from the Stanirok Sioux tribe. What inspired me was my ancestors, as we are called the 7th generation, and that inspired me because they made this prophecy 7 generations ago, saying that the youth are going to stand up for what's right and to save Mother Earth. And that's what inspired me to do what I do. So now I'm an activist. Now I've been a part of the big Standing Rock movement in North Dakota. I was part of the youth there, and I met with a lot of amazing people. So now I work for now I'm on like a couple boards that deal with like sustainable energy, all this amazing stuff. I'm on a board called Indigenize Energy. It's going to be one of the biggest solar farms in North Dakota. And but yeah, that's who inspired me to do what I do now. So it was my culture and my ancestors. So, but I'm really I'm looking forward to finish this application and stuff. So I just have some questions about that. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So everybody else in the chat, go ahead and chat your name, where you're from, someone or something that inspires you. If you have, we'll absolutely get to all of your questions about the application, and we're gonna kick it off. Thank you all so much. We're glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. So we wanted to share a little bit more about who we are. And so Daniel and I actually met for the first time, and it's very clear and vivid in my head, on November 8th, 2016. It was 2 days after my birthday, but that was not why I remember it. It was the morning that we were both at the UN climate conference, the COP that was happening in Morocco that year. And we woke up on the other side of the ocean to the news that Donald Trump had been elected. And we were there, and I remember waking up in the morning with my friend and my roommate and just crying and being like, wow, I cannot believe this just happened. And we walked from our hostel to the conference, and we got there, and just the entire insane. Like it felt like there was a lot of hope the night before, and then we and yeah, and then I had a pretty amazing experience that day though, where I met Daniel and a lot of other people from SustainUS because they did an amazing action. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, that was a wild morning in some ways. For me, it feels like a lot of the work that I'm doing now in my life has been defined from that day of when Trump won the election and that shift in our country. We, as SustainUS, this was a delegation 2 years ago, we held an action to publicly denounce and mourn the election results and kind of paint in really clear terms what, as young people, we feel that election meant, specifically around what we're seeing around this administration doing everything they can to not address climate change and not work for climate justice, and basically do the opposite. Starting, with Trump permitting or attempting to permit the Dakota Access Pipeline just days into office in a, absolutely devastating policy. And so we as youth came together in the UN to, denounce the election and also pledge to fight what's happening at every level. And that was a really powerful day when we met there.
Yeah.
We also wanted to share a little bit about, our stories and, who we are. I'll share briefly. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and I really first started to understand the intersection of environmental issues and climate change when I was in high school. Actually, when my dad went to a UN climate conference just as an observer when the year he was laid off from his job, and he went and he brought back a picture from it, and it was sort of on our wall, and it had a strong impact on me. And I used to think that climate change was just a technological problem or a problem about energy, and the more that I've learned and the more that I've been a climate activist in the movement, I see that it's really about like the roots of our whole culture and the founding of our country, and about our economic system and extraction and histories of capitalism and colonialism that sort of have given rise to this moment. So I've been involved in student fossil fuel divestment campaign, and also involved with an organization called Earth Guardians, where we use art and music to really connect youth around the world to get active in their own communities. And I've been a part of SustainUS for 3 years, and have gone on a previous delegation, and this year I'm co-leading with Aneesa this program to Poland.
Thanks. I'm from India. I was born there, but I grew up in Oman in the Middle East, in a country that's about 80% dependent on the extraction of petroleum to run the country. And it was kind of a crazy experience growing up in a really arid desert that experienced increases in temperature every year that were so obvious, but to continue to see them drill and extract every day. And there were days when I was little where it was so hot at certain times that you weren't allowed to leave the house during certain hours a day because you could die. And it was just such a disconnect. And I grew up in a family that's very environmentally conscious, and so was taught a lot about it, but was never really told about the connection between people and the environment. And for me, that really came together in high school when I wrote this paper on the effects of the tar sands of Canada on the Athabascan Chippewa First Nation. And for me, that's really when my understanding of climate justice was born. And so from there, I became very interested in engaging in the social movement and policy spaces related to climate justice. And so went to college in Maine to a little school called College of the Atlantic, where I joined one of SustainUS's sister organizations called Earth in Brackets, and went to the UN climate conferences, the COPs, in 2014, 2015, and 2016, kind of looking at policy and making demands for equity and justice at the international level. And it's a hard space to be. And I remember for me, like a really defining moment was being in Paris in 2015 when the global Paris Agreement on climate change came out, and watching countries kind of negotiating my future and the future of the rest of the world, and just like not reaching any kind of action that we need to address climate change. And at the same time, like drastic hurricane hit the city where my parents were living in India, and like hundreds of people died. I didn't hear from my family for about 3 days, and as an only child that hears from them every 4 hours, it was really scary. And like confronting the fact that my family could be a frontline community for climate change, like was a lot, and it really pissed me off. And I was like, I need to take a step back and look at things at maybe more of the grassroots level. And so I currently work at an amazing organization called the Wilderness Society, where we try to stop oil and gas drilling on public lands and push for more renewable energy policy and access to public lands for communities who historically have not been able to access them. And so that's kind of what I do when I'm not emailing you all or texting Daniel. And yeah, for me, I see so much value in working with youth for climate justice, and it's really what keeps me going in my everyday life.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my background, one part of it is if you had told me a few years ago that I was going to go to the International United Nations climate talks, I would have laughed, because my view of change is I really don't think that change comes from top-down global governments. I think it comes from the grassroots and from starts from activism and change in communities and initiatives at the community level. But I think both of us really believe that as young people, part of this organization, SustainUS, that has accreditation into the United Nations, we have the ability to be a bridge between grassroots social movements and local communities across the United States and these global international policy spaces where decisions are made that affect our lives. And so we both bring this this view of change comes from the bottom up, but also that engaging in these top-down spaces has value and relevance. So I think Aneesa is going to share a little bit about the background of the COPs and why we're going this year.
Yeah. So it was 1992. And
a great year.
Yeah, I was not born.
Just before I was born.
And 190 plus countries came together to create the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC. And basically what this was a recognition at the United Nations that climate change is human caused, and that climate change is an innately unfair problem. That historically developed countries, corporations, the rich have been responsible for creating climate change, but the people who are most affected by it and who are the most vulnerable to its impacts are those who are the most innocent in its causation. So those from developing countries, people of color, women, indigenous people, low-income families. Yeah, and so this was a pretty radical step, and kind of it was slow. People had known about it for a while, but like for a global agreement on this to come out was a big deal. And since then, every year countries gather together at the conferences of the parties, or the COPs. And so at the COPs, they gather every year to negotiate on policies in response to climate change. But what we've seen every year, time and time again, are systems of capitalism and colonialism replicate themselves within these conferences, where we see this constant battle between developed countries and developing countries, where developing countries are saying, we have a right to develop like you, but we want to do it sustainably, so give us finance, give us technology to do it. And developed countries are kind of like, why should we? And while this whole argument is happening, and it's really sad, there's also this beautiful movement happening through civil society organizations who go to the COP every year and who make strong demands for climate justice. And while countries are arguing, you see climate activists from all over the world coming together and having these massive movement moments at these conferences where they are connecting with each other, connecting their movements, like building relationships. And it's really important, and probably a space where I have met like mentors who have just completely changed my view on activism and like how to make change. And so I think they're really, I mean, the people I've met have been really amazing, and I think that COPs are a key place for social movement building as well, where we get to kind of influence policy to a certain degree, but also build our movement to be a lot stronger. And so in 2015, as a lot of you know, the Paris Agreement came out, where countries agreed to reduce their emissions in a way that would keep the temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius. But unfortunately, what we've seen is that a lot of the commitments that they've made are taking us to a world that's 4 degrees warmer. And this is unacceptable given that at 1.5 degrees of warming, we'll see entire islands disappearing and communities dying. And so we're kind of at this place where 2018 is a big year for international negotiations, but also for the climate justice.
It is, absolutely. Yeah, I see 2018, and we see 2018 as a really key moment to scale up and continue to build the movement for climate justice in all of our communities across the country and globally. You know, this COP, this Conference of the Parties, has been called Paris 2.0 by Patricia Espinosa, who's the chair of the UNFCCC process, because it's the first COP since Paris where a lot of really significant policy decisions will be cemented. So they'll basically be finalizing, within the negotiations, they'll be finalizing how they're going to make the Paris Agreement work in real life. And so it's a key moment in that global level. And then in our own country, it's a key moment. You know, it's an election year this fall with the midterm elections, a chance to elect leaders who can start to hopefully reverse some of the damage that the Trump administration has done. It's a year where there's going to be a massive global climate action summit in the United States in San Francisco that SustainUS is running an entire program around. It's a year when the 21 youth who are suing the government are going to be going to court, suing the Trump administration and the United States for perpetuating climate change. And it's a year where, social movements can continue to build and continue to work for changes at every level in our society. So we see 2018 as a really important year, and that this COP at the end of the year in December as a moment to amplify and uplift the social movement successes that have happened this year on that international stage, and to bring our voices as young people into that space and push leaders to act on the side of justice as they make these really significant decisions that are going to affect communities all around the world. And so while the specific goals of this delegation are not fully formed yet, the specific goals are going to be shaped by ultimately who joins the delegation. And there's going to be an opportunity for folks who are part of the delegation to help, shape our strategy and our approach. But we do have a sort of a guiding framework and a set of core values and principles that we're bringing. And we also have 2 themes of our delegation this year. And I'm going to tell you about one, and Aneesa is going to tell you about the other. Our themes this year are resilience and reparations. And resilience, one way to see it is that this UN climate talks space is a place where government leaders across the globe come together to negotiate about our very futures and our lives as young people. But these spaces really lack the imagination and the vision and the creativity needed to truly change the systems of capitalism and colonialism that lie at the root of the climate crisis. And so a lot of amazing work has been done to protest false solutions at the COP, solutions like solutions that commodify people's traditional lands and enter them into a market scheme to trade carbon credits. It's things that don't really solve the crisis, but that just look good on the surface. We protest those false solutions, but we also have to work towards the true ones. So our generation needs to be the generation that really leads the charge forward towards the real solutions to the climate crisis that address injustices and inequities in society and also are effective in meeting the urgency of climate change. So to us, resilience means the good work that people are doing all around the world already, in the spite of governments who are just working to protect the wealthy.
Yeah. And our second theme is reparations. And so, like I was saying earlier, the original convention recognized that developed countries with a very small percentage of the world's population are historically responsible for climate change, right? And it also recognizes that developing countries are the most vulnerable to its effects. And so every year we see developed countries making extremely weak commitments towards working on climate change. They've skirted around their obligations, they haven't stuck to any of their promises, and they allow the fossil fuel industry to sit at the table with them every year, which is ridiculous. And so our theme of reparations is extremely important because we see constant lip service with no action. And so the voices who are often the strongest among civil society at the COP are those of the people from developing countries, those in the global south, because they're the ones who have been making strong demands for resources that will help them adapt their agricultural systems, that will help them have a just transition of their energy systems, and that will help address the growing number of climate refugees in the developing world. And so this year, we see our delegation spending a lot of time having continuous conversation and building deep relationships with partners around the world so that we can be strong allies in the global movement for climate justice and help to make these demands with our, I guess, allies and friends who have been doing this for so long.
So resilience and reparations are two guiding themes of this year. And SustainUS overall has themes as well. I'm just going to chat in the link about SustainUS for folks who want to read more. And just to say that as an organization, SustainUS has been bringing young people to spaces of political decision making for over 10 years. And we have a set of principles that underlie our work. And you can check those out on the About page. But these 10 principles really give a little more background about who we are and what we value as an organization as well. And a really key part of what we value as an organization is training young leaders. So we're going to this COP and we're going to be bringing our voices and bringing everything that we've just talked about. But in addition, this is an opportunity to really up-level your organizing skills and your leadership skills, and particularly your media work and direct action skills. SustainUS has trained a lot of young people in media work. That's social media, traditional media. Our actions have landed on the front page of the New York Times, media across the world, and we really understand how to translate what's happening within a social movement to language that can bring more people in and can continue to build the movement. So training in media skills and in action work and planning actions that make an impact, and also in community building work and solidarity organizing skills. So for folks who come on the delegation, there's going to be a summer training where we're going to have a lot of opportunity to train, but really all throughout the year and at the COP, it's an on-the-ground training experience as well as an action experience, because we learn as we go, and we don't expect people to come in with a full knowledge of climate policy and social movement tactics and media work. It's something that we train people in. And Aneesa is going to be bottom lining an amazing curriculum around understanding policy and what's happening in negotiations, as well as many different mentors and alumni of SustainUS are going to be supporting the delegation to train all of us. So there's going to be a great opportunity to learn a whole lot through this program. And the bottom line is we want you all at the end of this year, after the COP, that you go home with new tools and skills and energy to continue the good work that you're doing back in your communities.
Yeah. And I think for us, that's one of our main goals. And as delegation leaders, sure, we have some vision of what the delegation looks like, but once we have selected everyone, that's really when we will start shaping our goals for this year and what we want to do, what we want to show up, who we want to show up as, and who we want to show up with.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and I think for us, the thing that would be the greatest would be to leave the conference feeling even more invigorated and excited to work on the ground on the issues that we care about within the US.
Absolutely. So that's the overview of our delegation. and why we're going and some of our key goals. And we're going to move now to the overview of the application process. If you have any questions about what we've said, go ahead and chat them in the Q&A. And right after this, we'll get into the Q&A and get to answer everyone's questions. So you may have noticed already that this application process is not your typical application, because we're asking you all to create some sort of piece that communicates what you do in the world and your story and share it publicly. And the background, the reason for this is SustainUS began this kind of an application process in 2016. And we saw that so many amazing people were applying for these delegations and spending hours like writing their story. And they would put it into a Google Doc and it would sit in our Google Drive, and nothing would happen with it. And we really wanted this, this application process to be a movement building tool for young people, so that more young people are sharing our stories out there in the world. You know, stories have the power to shape people's perceptions of the world and to create like a personal emotional connection to social issues. So we really feel that you telling your stories and responding to this prompt is gonna, you know, regardless of if you come on the delegation, is gonna be a positive experience. So step one to the application process is registering for it by filling out the call for interest form. And pretty much all of you on this call have already done that. So congratulations on taking the first step. And really the next step here is to write a piece that responds to our prompt. And we're gonna just go through this step by step so it's really clear for you all. You wanna share the prompt? Step two is to read this prompt and to start working on your story.
So our prompt for all of you is, why do you engage in the movement for climate justice, and how does your work connect with global movements for climate justice?
Absolutely. And by climate justice, we see this as really an expansive lens. It's a lens that speaks to the multifaceted nature of the climate crisis and the need for solutions that address the root causes of climate change. So if your work doesn't directly talk about climate change, that is totally okay. Maybe you talk mostly about water rights, or about access to healthy food, or about gender and violence prevention, or maybe your focus is around indigenous sovereignty or land or human rights or solar energy. You know, there's so many different elements to climate justice. So
yeah, and I think that a good way to think of it is, I will be paraphrasing a lot, but Naomi Klein talks about this in her book, This Changes Everything, where she talks about how climate justice, the movement for climate justice, is the movement that can really pull all of our strong movements together, movements for racial justice, for women's rights, for tribal sovereignty, because people who are on the front lines of climate change are often the people who are fighting for justice in other ways, right? And so she really sees climate justice bringing together all these movements. And so I think that's a great way to look at it. And I think that working towards fighting climate change gives us the opportunity to create policies and communities and lifestyles that can really reinvigorate the way we live from the bottom up. And yeah, so I think that's like a nice way to think about it.
Yeah. And we're not looking for any one answer. The question, why do you fight for climate justice, and how does this connect to the global movement? We want you to share in your in the piece that you create, you know, who you are, why you do what you do, and to have you start to draw some connections between what you see around you in your community or in where you're living and working with what's happening around the planet. But there's no right answer to that. There's if there's over 7 billion people in the world, then there's over 7 billion answers to this question. So really use our question as a guide. And the guidance I would offer is guidance that a mentor gave to me around storytelling, which is tell a story that you're hungry for. You know, tell a story that really matters to you, that only you can tell. So it's a story that has meaning for you and that's personal to you, that's coming from your own lived experience. So within our prompt, some sub-prompts that can help guide your attention. And again, we're just reading off the website, so it's all here for you to reference at any time on our website. I'll just chat the link again. You know, how is the work you're doing in your community or elsewhere building towards climate justice in the United States? How is the work that you're doing or the life that you're living demonstrating resilience, that capacity to create a better world, even when the political circumstances are so dire? Why does the work you're doing matter to you? How would coming to COP24 be supportive to your work? How does global issues and local issues intersect for you? So again, you absolutely do not have to answer all of these questions in your submission. They're just suggestions to help guide you, and ultimately we want to get to know you and to understand why you do the work that you do. So so between now and June 4th, the deadline, you will write 1 or 2 pieces. And by write, I mean create, because these pieces don't have to be written. They can be, we'll share some examples in a minute, but they can be many mediums. So you'll create 1 to 2 pieces, and you'll publicly share your piece in some way. This could mean publishing it in a newspaper or a magazine or a blog. It could mean sharing it just on social media. It could mean physically sharing it in your community in some way. It counts for your application as long as what you've created, you share it with other people and document how you shared it with other people.
And don't worry if you have tried to get it published somewhere and they said we can only publish it after June 4th. As long as your story gets shared at some point in the near future, that's what really matters to us. And so if it's getting published after June 4th, feel free to just get a little note from the people who are publishing it saying this will be published at some point and submit it to us as a link.
Absolutely. Some examples of mediums that people have used in previous years are photo essays that are accompanied with text about that responds to the prompt. Op-eds. An op-ed is an opinion piece that newspapers and magazines will write. A Facebook video. People have gone on Facebook Live or produced a video for a Facebook page that has been shared. A blog post. You're writing an article in a magazine or a newspaper. Those are just some examples, and many more.
Yeah, and people have done like art pieces, songs, and if you're looking to be really creative in like artistic ways, then feel free to go for it. But it would be great if you submit something like that to have a little write-up about it as well.
Mm-hmm. So we have a special treat for you all. We have Ryan Camaro and Charlie on the call with us, who have participated in previous delegations and who have done this challenge themselves. So we're going to bring them on and we want each of you, Ryan and Charlie, to share for about 5 minutes each. And Michael, who's coming on this delegation, should hopefully be joining as well. Michael needs to be sent the link. Great. We're going to send Michael the link. But for Ryan and for Charlie, go ahead and share just for about 3 minutes. Share, who you are. Say hi to everyone, and share what you did for your creative challenge submission and how you navigated it, and any words of advice or wisdom that you would like to share with folks. Let's start with you, Ryan.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Well, first of all, I really just want to say thank you to Aneesa and Daniel for orienting folks to, the intricate world of global climate justice movements as it relates to the UN. I think all of you are in for a journey in navigating your personal stories, in playing a part in this like movement mosaic of folks trying to make this world better in all the ways. And just to speak to what Daniel was saying earlier about as you folks begin to look into stories of how your work relates to climate justice, I think one thing that really resonates true for me is that climate justice is made up of the interconnection between social, economic, and ecological issues. So I'm going to start just really quickly with a little bit about me, and then kind of going into my work and how I submitted to the Creative Challenge. So my name is Ryan. I am one of the coordinators this year for the California Allegory Youth Fellowship for the Global Climate Action Summit that Daniel spoke to earlier. A lot of my work was based first dealing with a lot of gang violence and gang culture and drug abuse issues in Stockton, California, where I am from, and really doing community organizing first on those levels before learning about water privatization and the danger that corporate agribusiness and fossil fuel industries had on the rivers that I lived and grew up on. And that kind of brought me into all sorts of work and led me to SustainUS. And yeah, I want to speak a little bit about the submission that I contributed to for the SustainUS challenge a couple of years ago. I'm going to put this right in the link here. So for me, a lot of my work has really been built on community arts organizing that kind of evolved into arts activism. So this is a link to this article called Harmonizing the People's Voice that was on this arts magazine I helped co-found in Stockton called Placeholder Magazine. It's kind of the fourth part to a 4-part series that you could get links to in the article that shows kind of my journey through the COP21 Paris climate talks, and a lot of what kind of there was just kind of trying to understand how the work that I had been doing pre-SustainUS kind of related to climate justice. And one of the collectives I work with is the Beehive Design Collective. So, I kind of shared this reflection on the experiences I had in Paris. And getting on that delegation was it was very inadvertent. I think a lot of that was coming off of the work that I was doing, trying to protect the rivers here in California. And the way that helped me, at least just to give you folks some helpful tips about processing, is I think being very playful in your process, like getting paper out, if you're able to get a whiteboard or get butcher paper and just start scrawling and just stream of conscious lay out what you care about. Why does climate justice matter to you? What issues really are important? I really liked what you were saying, Daniel, about what stories are you hungry for? And that in that way, you're able to get a kind of clear sense of even seeing this challenge as a way to amplify and self-actualize the things that you care about. Because I think regardless of the folks that end up being part of the COP24 delegation, is the folks within and beyond the COP24 delegation are part of this global movement for climate justice, and that work will continue to happen regardless of what will occur. So I would encourage you to just put your full passion into it and navigate how this process could support what you are aiming to do in the world. And just to close off, I really would invite folks to be creative, and like use this as a way to stretch your wings. If you have a practice, a personal creative practice that you just want to put forward to tell this narrative of climate justice for you, I would invite you to do that. If you want to stretch yourself to pitch an op-ed, to do that. And SustainUS has many resources for folks, and has kind of a whole community of different youth leaders that are really excited about supporting all of you to be the best folks that you can be in terms of personal well-being and in terms of contributing to collective liberation. So so that's me. I definitely would encourage you folks to reach out to Daniel and Aneesa if you have any requests for support, and otherwise I wish you the best of luck in your journey.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And Ryan, again, participated in the SustainUS. He was in Paris at COP21. He was in Morocco with us for COP22, and he was supporting arts work for COP23. And Charlie, who is going to come up next, was a delegate for COP23 in Bonn, Germany, and has been a really key member of SustainUS ever since, and is going to share a little bit about his journey. And Charlie, particularly share how it was doing the creative challenge for you and what you'd encourage for folks along the way.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for hosting this, Daniel and Aneesa, and thanks for everyone for being on here. It's really great to see your names. I wrote out some notes on my phone and then promptly deleted them, so I'm going to try and wing it. It's going to be great. My name's Charlie. I joined SustainUS as a COP23 delegate last year, and I was one of our lead policy action strategy people, something like that. And let's see, I'm currently an organizer and policy analyst based in Washington, D.C., but I grew up in Chicago, went to school in California, so call all these places home. And when I was first thinking about applying to SustainUS, I was going through a really interesting time and exploring my own story. My parents were immigrants from China to the US. Trump, of course, was president, and that meant all sorts of things for people of color. I was reflecting on my own experiences growing up on the south side of Chicago and seeing segregation happening everywhere around me, and also trying to reconcile that with my interests just on an academic level and in my work with climate and energy work. And I wanted to figure out how to tell that story mostly to myself. But then when the opportunity to do the collective challenge, the creative challenge came on last year for COP23, I thought that this could be a really great opportunity to try and tell that story to the world, and maybe in a way that would be helpful for others and helpful for me. Of course, I was really interested in joining COP23 because it was a really important year. It was the first year under Trump. I think a really pivotal year for the global movement to see that young people from the US were on the side of justice and were on the side of wanting action. Anyway, they're trying to hurry me up. The specific piece I did then, thinking about all these things, was a blog post on the Power Shift Network. I'm about to put it in the chat. And I wrote about my parents coming to the US from China with very little money in their pockets. I wrote about some of the work that I'd been doing in DC at that time. And I wrote about what I was hopeful about the climate movement being a home and a connective tissue for all our movements in the US and around the world. I wanted to say that I thought that this work, fighting for climate justice, could be another way for us to get closer to an America for all of us. It was a really great opportunity for me, I think, to really put to words what I was trying to think about and create at that time. And was able to share it with the world just in time for the deadline. And so thinking about all that, my advice to you all working on the COP24 challenge, a couple of things. One, I think it's really helpful to just speak deep from your experience or from your heart. I think I would be less interested in reading more theory and buzzwords, but much more interested in hearing what you have to say, what you have to share about your work, about your life, about your perspective. And the other thing is that, especially with the theme of resilience and reparations, I think the message of hope and of actual solutions and of stories of what is working is really important this time around. And I would be really excited to read all your stories about what is happening in the world and in your communities that is moving us forward in a way that's really hopeful and really driving us towards a truly just world. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Charlie. That was really great. I would like to introduce Michael Charles to talk about his experiences, what he does, and how his creative challenge process went last year. He was on the COP23 delegation to Germany. Michael, welcome.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Charles. I currently live in Ohio, in Columbus. I'm a PhD student right now in chemical engineering at The Ohio State University, and my research kind of focuses a lot in like sustainable process design and how do we mix sustainability and value of ecosystems into kind of frameworks like engineering. And my whole story and my journey through the creative challenge was a lot about how did I balance my own culture with my academia. So I'm from the Navajo Nation. I was born right outside of our reservation in Arizona. Sorry if it's hard to hear. There's an airplane going over me. But I'll let it pass. Yeah, so for me, it was, my whole life was kind of this whole search of balance between academia and culture. And really what I learned is trying to figure out how my culture influenced my work as a chemical engineer. Ended up being a lot with how do we balance even indigenous values and indigenous cultures into engineering, and how do we do that across all sorts of like fields such as policy and activism, which is really what pushed me towards SustainUS. For me, my story was a lot of work with Standing Rock and trying to balance this idea of environmental justice and these like green groups who would come out to these rallies, and how to balance what their claims and asks were with those of kind of the indigenous people. A lot of us were there more for like human rights, not necessarily environmental concerns. We weren't really concerned about what was going through that pipeline versus some of the ways that we were dealing with police brutality and just kind of disrespect for our humanity in general. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up at all into the environmental climate justice movement. And so for me, the whole creative challenge was, how do I sit down and tell my story, and really go through, I didn't have a ton of experience in organizing, activism, any of that beforehand. So for me, it was, how do I tell a story of this kind of constant search of balance? How do I keep sharing that with the world of how these different themes have ended up leading me to this passion for environmental justice and climate justice and all the different intersections that tie within it. And I think what Daniel said earlier about it doesn't have to be just, you know, divestment movements in college or really environmental movements. You could be coming to this from any different space or any different work, whether it's, like you gave a bunch of examples earlier. So I think that's kind of where I fell into as applying for the COP24 delegation. And for me, I'm not like, I'm an engineer. We're not necessarily always the most creative of people. So when I first heard Creative Challenge, it was interesting to think about the idea of storytelling and like what mediums I would go through. So for me, I submitted 2 different things. And in ours, we were asked to do 2 different parts. And so I did one more by video, kind of just like this, like a sit down kind of interview and just tell my story, because that was more comfortable for me than sitting down and writing and trying to tell my story that way, or trying to figure out how to publish it. So I worked with a media company I'd worked with before. And so I think what I learned from that first, I guess, project is how to like use kind of connections I already had to not necessarily worry about publishing it in the biggest area, but to just kind of use it as a starting point to figure out how to get involved in this in general and how to publish a story or how to share a story versus just like a post on Facebook, which we're all more probably familiar with. So that would be my suggestion, is try to think about people you've worked with, or even reach out to any of us involved with either past projects or the delegation leaders to figure out what might be those steps in trying to publish that could be concerning. And then my second one was more of just like a blog post of how my research relates to all this and how what I think about every day ends up playing a role in this climate justice movement. Yeah, so I think for me, I think the most important thing is just kind of tell your story. What Charlie said is it's got to come from you and be your perspective. He mentioned it's not as interesting to have all the theory, the jargon, to say it perfectly. It's really just important to tell your story and like tell us what you bring, and how to share that with the world. I think that's mostly what we're looking for, and yeah, doing that within the themes. Does that help, Daniel and Aneesa?
Yes, awesome. And I forgot to mention that Michael will be coming with us as a returning delegate. So if you thought his story was interesting and you want to interact with him and hang out, submit your application. It's going to be great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks.
We want to underscore what Michael said here. If you have never told your story before, or if you don't identify as being creative, or if you've never done something like this before, that's totally okay. We don't expect you to do something impossible for yourself. So we want you to challenge yourself with this process, but to also, do something that's within the realm of what's, feasible for you, given who you are. If you've written a lot and pitched a lot of pieces to media outlets, maybe try pitching a piece to a slightly bigger media outlet. If you've never written a story before, or your story before and shared it, then even just sharing it with your community on a personal blog or social media might be a risk for you. So we're not selecting people based on how prominent or famous the publishing outlet is, as much as just seeing that you've pushed yourself in some way and have sought to grow from this experience. So it's time for us to hear a little more from you all. We want to give you a chance to ask us questions. So what questions do you all have about our delegation and the application process? You can go ahead and chat it in the Q&A, and then we'll bring folks, we'll start to answer folks' questions.
Thanks, Charlie.
I'll just read out loud while y'all type. Charlie says, best wishes and good luck to all of you. I'm excited to see your stories and the depths of all your creativity, passion, and power. Ryan said, sending you all so much love and luck for your work. Wishing you a great climate justice challenge. And he also says, may it inspire 1,000 flowers to bloom for collective liberation.
Amazing.
While folks start to write your questions in the Q&A, we're going to start to answer a few of the most commonly asked questions. The first is, who's eligible for this delegation? Can you join this delegation if you're doing amazing climate justice work in another country and you don't have any connection to the United States? No, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but SustainUS is a youth organization, and we have accreditation to the United Nations as a U.S. organization. So to join this delegation, you must either be a United States citizen or have attended school or work or lived in the United States for at least 6 months. So again, you don't have to be a citizen, but you do have to sort of call the U.S. home. Yeah, Aneesa is here on a visa and isn't a citizen and is leading our delegation. And you have to be between the ages of 18 and 29 years old when the COP happens. We have a question from Claire. I have a question. What is the time commitment like? Do you all have dates set yet? I will be a college freshman, so I don't want to overcommit to something that will prevent me from passing my classes in my first year. That is a great question, Claire. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we have dates set. There's a date section on the website, but we can go through them right now as well. So you would submit your application by June 4th, and then we would select the delegates by June 20th. Sorry, Daniel, can you pull that up?
Yep.
We would select the delegates by June 20th, and then we have our retreat, which is required, where we would all meet each other face-to-face, go through trainings, bond, talk about our goals from July 11th to the 15th. The Global Climate Action Summit, which is not required, will be happening from September 12th to the 14th. And then the actual conference will be happening from December 2nd to December 15th, and this is required. This will hopefully, I don't know when winter break starts for a lot of colleges, but maybe that might overlap and that might help. And there's also the Conference of the Youth, which is where youth activists gather before the actual COP, which is happening from November 29th to December 1st. This isn't required, but recommended. Yeah.
I have a thought, which is I have participated in the SustainUS delegation as a college student, and Aneesa absolutely has. And really the one thing to know is folks have taken time off of school to come participate in these delegations. And the way that that's happened successfully before for SustainUS delegates is to work with their professors to get special permission to do so. So if the COP is during your school year, during your semester, we've had college students come whose professors have said, oh, well, you're going on this delegation. I know the dates. and have like rescheduled people's finals for them or created special deadlines for them. But it's really been up to the student and their faculty and their professors and advisors to kind of navigate that. And we're happy to provide support, but it's sort of an individual choice for you to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that in terms of time commitment, it will really vary. I think when it first starts out, it will be a smaller time commitment. And then as we move closer to the date, it will be a little larger. So I'd say on average between 5 to 10 hours a week. Hopefully on the smaller side for a lot of you. We know that it's going to be you all have lives and amazing work that you're doing, but yeah, as we get closer to the date, time commitment will increase a little bit. But we'll be an extremely supportive space to help people kind of work around their schedules and work so that they can come to this conference if they really want to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I personally did was I tied in one of my final projects for a class with the COP. So I worked on it a little bit there, and I actually got credit for telling the story of a project we worked on at COP22. I like wrote about it for school and got credit for it. So there are creative ways. If you're really called to join this delegation, please apply and complete the creative challenge. And we're happy to, continue to talk this through and also to provide like guidance for how to navigate your school work.
Okay.
We have a question for Sophia, who says, does the story have to explicitly mention the SustainUS challenge, or would a story shared at, for example, an action put on by an organization I work with in which I do not talk about the SustainUS challenge count? The second thing, you do not need to talk about the SustainUS challenge in your submission. You're welcome to. You could write a piece or speak at an action and mention SustainUS, but you absolutely don't have to. In some cases, it probably wouldn't make sense to. I know for the piece I wrote to come to COP22, I didn't say that it was for the SustainUS challenge. I simply wrote a piece and got it published and then submitted the piece to SustainUS as part of my application. So I hope that answers the question. It is up to you if you mention that it's for the challenge. If you're pitching a piece to a magazine or newspaper or blog, it might be interesting to them to know that like you're writing this story and you're also writing it as part of a challenge to go to an international climate conference. It might be useful to share in some contexts, and in others, it might not be useful to share.
Yeah, and you can definitely talk about your action, and that would count.
Mm-hmm. Great. What other questions do folks have from us? Maybe we could answer one from the FAQ. One that I've gotten asked a lot is who are you looking for? Like, how are you going to select people? If I'm going to put my time and energy into writing a story and applying, who are we looking for to join the delegation? And the answer is, we're looking for to build a team of people who are willing to give part of their life this year to the team, who are action-oriented, climate justice organizers, storytellers, activists, community builders, people doing work that's building towards climate justice between the ages of 18 and 29. And, to me, personally, the thing that we're most looking for is people who are ready to work on a community-oriented team that will collectively work for something. But beyond that, as an organization, we're looking for people who come from communities that are impacted by climate injustices and who are doing work in their communities for climate justice. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, and to me, I don't see people who are organizing their communities as just people who are activists and holding rallies and going to marches. You could be studying climate policy somewhere, and that's benefiting the movement for climate justice. So I think that don't limit yourself based on what you think your genre of activism is.
Yep.
This challenge is purposely open-ended, and the question is broad to encourage a very diverse group of people to apply.
Mm-hmm. The final question I wanted to just touch on is around the finances of the delegation. Our intention for this delegation is that we're a fully funded program that covers all of the costs of traveling to COP, traveling to the training, food and housing, as well as offers a small stipend to each person on the delegation. And to do that, we're already fundraising now, and we're also going to be doing collective fundraising. So what this means is if you're accepted to the delegation, you're not going to be asked to pay your own way to come to COP. SustainUS will be covering the costs, but you will be asked to engage in crowdfunding and trying to form any partnerships or sponsorships with organizations or your school if you go to school. And we have a development lead, an organization, Gavi, who's coming with us, who's amazing and who's going to be supporting you on every step of the way. So we have a fundraising plan. We have successfully fully funded the program the past 2 years, and it's through a combination of work from existing SustainUS members, like Aneesa and I. We've already applied for some grants to cover the costs, and then we'll also going to be asking folks to participate in fundraising. We're going to answer 2 more questions here from Laura and Shauna.
So Laura says, could you talk a little bit about the programs for the retreat/training and the Global Climate Action Summit?
Yep. The retreat is going to be in Colorado from July 11th to 15th. And the retreat is going to be, both a community building and bonding experience for the delegates where we'll all get to know each other deeply. We'll get to build relationships. And we're also going to have a curriculum and do a lot of training.
Yeah. And we're hoping to have some guest speakers come in as well to talk to us about their work, maybe in the Colorado region, but also people who are doing global climate justice work. And the retreat, travel to the retreat and everything will also be fully funded. So anything involved in this program will be funded through money that we raise.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what areas we're going to be training on?
Yeah. So throughout this process, we will be training people specifically to skill up in media skills so that could be things from spokesperson training to digital and social media to graphic design to how to pitch and things like that. And then we will also train people in action skills. So this will be nonviolent direct action, and it could also be like training people on like art activism and just various different kinds of actions. And then finally in community building and solidarity organizing. So like how to build partnerships, how to do nonviolent communication with people, how to in culturally respectful ways communicate with people. And so those will kind of be the 3 main things. And then there will also be a certain like policy background on this conference and like what kind of demands that we'll be making, who are the groups we'll be interacting with, so kind of an understanding of the landscape there. And so there will be like training sessions at this retreat, but throughout the year as well. And at least we're hoping to have maybe weekly, bi-weekly webinars where experts will kind of call in.
Absolutely.
And talk to us.
In terms of the Global Climate Action Summit, if you ever hear people say the word GCAS, it's the Global Climate Action Summit, and it's a 2-day conference happening in San Francisco before the COP. We don't fully know yet exactly how we're going to engage at the GCAS, but SustainUS is a part of many conversations planning around the People's Climate March that's going to be happening in California and in around direct actions that are California specific, and also in pushing policymakers that come to the summit for bolder action leading into the COP24. So the most truthful answer is we're excited about the GCAS. I live in Oakland, Aneesa lives in DC, so being based in California, I'm certainly going to be involved in things around the GCAS, and we're going to be finding the best ways and the most strategic ways for delegates who are selected for the COP to engage in the GCAS in some way. We don't totally know how yet, but we're involved in statewide youth planning calls, and SustainUS is running a specific fellowship around the Global Climate Action Summit that we're in conversation with around how we're going to partner with them.
Yeah, and we envision that there will be some overlap between the 2 programs that SustainUS is running, and we'd love to see them connecting over this big movement moment.
Yeah. Let's take Shauna's question as maybe one of our final questions.
Yeah. So Shauna says, I'm not quite sure how to share my story. I've always had a passion for sustainability and climate justice. Could I reach out to one of you directly? Absolutely. Daniel and I are here to help throughout this process. And please, if you have any questions, we realize we just threw a bunch of information at y'all, and that questions come and go as they please. And so definitely reach out to us over email that Daniel just posted in the chat, and ask us anything you feel doubts about, and we will get back to you, answer them to the best of our ability.
Yep. Yeah, we are here for you. So we'd love for you to join us. We would love to just extend a heartfelt invite to all of you who are here live, who are watching on the recording, to complete the challenge. You need to create your piece and publicly share it in some way by June 4th. And then you'll fill out a final Google form, or you'll share the link to what you created, or you can upload some form of documentation that shows how it was shared. For instance, if it was a dance piece and you performed it, you could share the link to the video. If it was a written piece that was published, you could share the link to where it was published. That's all due June 4th. So it gives y'all a couple of weeks to work on that, and we'd love for you to join us. We're here to answer your questions by email. We've set up a Facebook group for folks participating where you can, if you post questions there, Aneesa and I will respond. But you can also just, share encouragement with each other. You can share ideas with each other. It's a place to just remember that we're all human beings that are in this movement together. And ultimately, regardless of if you come to COP or not, the process of being part of a group writing your stories, we hope can be an exciting experience for everyone.
Yeah.
Closing words?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we got to do this. We'll be probably having another webinar, and we will send out the details about that soon. That will be more focused on telling your story, pitching, and yeah, we're still figuring out the agenda for it, but we will be in touch. So keep an eye out for our emails, stay in touch with us, ask us any questions you have, and we are really excited and looking forward to reading your applications.
Yep. So for a final fun little thing, it's going to get a little messy, but I'm going to take everybody off mute just for a moment, and we'll all just shout goodbye for a sec, so we can all hear each other one final time. I've tried to unmute as many as I can. So let's all just say goodbye to everybody. Goodbye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Till soon.